You may be familiar with the structure of the human brain, which is also called the triune brain, the three-part brain. Humor me for a little while we talk about 4 brain centers. So we'll start with the most basic. The very first one to develop is our brainstem. It's about the size of our fist and also extends down, starting to meet the spinal column. This brainstem is often called the reptilian brain, and you can probably guess why. It's the oldest, most ancient structure in our bodies, and it's shared even with animals that never progress past becoming reptiles. This brainstem is responsible for our survival. If you can remember back to high school bio, these are the 4 F's. Fight or flight and freeze, feeding, and that last F is, you're right, fornication, which is probably the word you were thinking of too. Next to develop after our brainstem is our midbrain. It sits over top of your brainstem. We will often call this the mammalian brain. It's shared with mammals that have had more time to evolve past lizards and things of that nature. And in this midbrain, we find the limbic system, which is a really fascinating area. Our limbic system governs over our 5 senses. We call it our emotional nervous system. And its responsibilities include monitoring our emotional lives, learning, and the formation of memories. Interestingly enough, your amygdala is here. Your amygdala, whenever we're faced with a threat, a challenge, or a scare, sounds a lot like the things that would normally turn on that sympathetic response in our bodies. Our amygdala can become locked. This is biological. This locking of the amygdala actually overrides our frontal lobes, the ones that are in charge of responding to things with grace and ease, diplomacy. Interestingly, I did not know that the amygdala was part of the mammalian brain, and mine became locked when I found out it was here and not in the brainstem. So here's a scenario. Our amygdala can become locked in response to any physical threat or even an emotional threat, such as a challenged belief. It doesn't even need to be a belief that we think that we have or that we know that we have. It can be something even more subtle than that. Picture this. You're at home with my big Italian family and politics comes up at the dinner table. We are getting so fired up that a conversation can't occur. Well, why not? We're interested enough. The beliefs are being challenged here. I'm a good person is being challenged here. My ability to discern what's right for me is being challenged here. And we assign meaning to everything. We're going to talk a little bit more about this when we start to speak about the formation of memories. So back to that limbic system, that mammalian brain. Your limbic system is actually shared with mom or your primary caretaker up until age 3. Imagine that. Early childhood traumas can develop here if, let's say, mom was unavailable to us, if mom had traumas of her own or some kind of dampened emotional response. That can really impact us. Here's a question for you. What are some of the emotional wounds that your mother carried? And here's a second question. Do you have any evidence that you inherited that wound or replicated that pattern of thoughts? Take a few moments to mull it over and write your responses in the comments section. Again, you're reminded that other people will see this. It'll remain semi-private within other registrants of our class. And now I'll continue on to the forebrain, which is the human brain. So These three areas, the brainstem, the mammalian brain, and the forebrain, work in concert together to create the triune brain. But let's talk just about the forebrain. This is where we have the formation of the right and the left hemispheres of the brain. Bear with me for a little bit. We're going to deviate into the woo-woo for a moment. In Eastern philosophies, such as yoga, we talk about energies. We talk about feminine energies, not gender, and masculine energies, again, not related to gender. Every single person has both. But for a moment, let's play with this idea. Have some fun with it. The right side of the brain and the left side of the body in these philosophies are regarded as feminine energies. They are wild, creative, they're communicative, they're expressive. How fascinating. Oppositely, and equally importantly, the left side of the brain and the right side of the body are regarded as being more masculine. They tend to be more logical, more analytical, more linear. They're really great at things like focus, control, compartmentalization. Incredible, right? It's one of my favorite topics to speak on. Interestingly, neuroscientists have often noticed that people tend to turn their faces when they're being drawn for portraits to display the left side of their face. This is my left side. It tends to be more expressive than our right side of our face. Who knew? That's incredible. So that's our triune brain. We're going to move forward, and since I asked ahead of time, please humor me, we're going to talk about a fourth brain center. Where am I going with this? I'm going into our hearts and into a field of study called neurocardiology. Can you believe that 60 to 65% of our heart cells are neural in nature? There's that word again. Neural just means made out of nerve fibers. But our hearts have a direct link to our limbic system, that emotional nervous system, and it's always sending emotional cues. Now, I didn't ask ahead of time, but I am going to venture ahead into, maybe we can make an argument together for a fifth brain center, and I'm going for the gut brain. And the reason being is it's good to have some consciousness around this area, around our gut, because our gut actually holds 90 to 95% of our serotonin receptors. There's another high school bio word. Serotonin is the happiness hormone. So we might think about things like comfort food. What would cause food to be so comforting? Well, it has a little bit to do with the presence of these serotonin receptors. And they've actually done food intervention studies where they looked to treat people with depression. And the intervention was starting to feed people whole foods and to get them to stabilize their blood sugar levels. And as they stabilized them, they reported a drop in depression. We also receive messages from our gut. What kind of messages? Well, these messages can be felt as good things, bad things. We may even call them intuitive information, such as, I get a really good feel about that job applicant, or, no, that alley just seems really sketchy, I don't want to go that route. And our gut, again, is communicating with our brain. It's actually traveling the length of that vagus nerve, that 10th cranial nerve that exits the spinal column and innervates in our bellies. From our breathing exercise that we first began our studies together, that vagus nerve innervates all of those organs in our gut, in our abdomen. And it's a one-sided conversation. The gut speaks directly to the brain. Information travels along that vagus nerve. If we were to translate the word vagus from its Latin into its English, It means the wandering nerve. So, to circle back, an easy intervention for mood regulation can be consuming foods and supplements to stabilize your blood sugar. In the case study that we looked at, it was chromium picolinate. And to regulate your bowels also using probiotics. These can be wonderful supports to any other medical interventions that you're receiving.